there are three things that I want to talk about today. The first is that I didn't manage to make this vlog yesterday. I had a really crazy day. It started with me waking up early, making a cup of coffee, and then I was going to water it down with a little bit of water in my water bottle. And I had just poured water in my water bottle and didn't get the cap on because my hand was busy with something else. Anyhow, when I went to, more water, add water to my coffee, to my espresso to make it an Americano, I dumped the bottle in and had a puddle basically right next to my computer. Luckily, although my notebook got a little bit, some pages wet, it didn't get on any of my electronics. Oh, so that was scary. Then I worked a little bit and decided to take the dogs out for a walk before recording the video, to do the video a little bit later once I had warmed up. And when I tried to come back in, the electronic lock on the Airbnb where I'm staying did not malfunction for the second time. And so I was locked out of my apartment, this time for only an hour and a half. The person that had a master key supposedly to it was really far away. And I basically talked them into getting a locksmith who was able to come over and within 2 minutes had it open. But they wanted me to sit outside for an hour and a half plus. They say an hour and a half, but what that means in Latin American speak is like 2 to 2.5 hours. And I did not bring even my phone with me because I typically, when I go for my dog walks, I don't take anything with me. So I was stuck outside and it really derailed my entire day. There's something about the oppressiveness of the heat here and not having anywhere like around here that I could go and sit down. So that was my tragedy of yesterday. All of that to say that I didn't record my video yesterday. But I have been working on the Maria Lugones piece, which keeps bringing up lots of side avenues as well. And yesterday I was thinking about how I was trying to think about an analogy for the relationship between women, because this essay is all about how women can learn to center their lives around other women and what a kind of playful attitude towards getting to know each other is, and what kinds of failures of love prevent us from forming the kind of attachments and bonds and friendships that are needed to be able to then, on top of that, build a political we, right? So I was thinking about how the first time that I went to Portland, Oregon, I was staying with a friend, and her parents had her childhood home was just outside of Portland. And so we wanted to go into the center of Portland to do something, I remember. Oh, no, actually, I remember what it was. We wanted to visit a friend of hers that lived across the way. And in order to, like, she lived here, they lived here, right? In order to get from here to here, we actually had to travel all the way into Portland and then back into the city center and then back out, right? So the relationship between all of the suburbs is always mediated by the center and the way that the public transportation system is built. I think we ended up using the bikes. So we were trying to decide whether to do it with the bikes or not. And I rode her brother's bike or something like that. I don't remember, which was a lot more fun and explains probably why so many people ride bikes in Portland when it's like pouring down rain half the time, right? In any case, that made me think about how Paris is also, Paris is the center of France, and everything goes through the center. It's very much set up that way. And then I also started to think about how Latin American countries don't have, up until very recently, when they started to form political kind of bonds at the height of the American empire and of the American control in Latin America, all the relationships between these countries that are neighbors always went through U.S. diplomatic channels. So it was, maybe that's overstating it. the relationships were always mediated by U.S. interests. I think that's a better way to put it, right? I think those are all correlates of centralized control or the organization of resources around a centralized kind of core. And as Simone de Beauvoir noted way back in the 49, whenever the second sex is published, right? It's very difficult for women to form a political we. And one of the reasons for that is because we're spread out amongst the population. So unlike the working class, which tend to live physically in the same areas at the time that she was writing, and so could form bonds that because of their physical proximity. I'm not going to remember all the examples now, but women are spread out across all the classes, all the races, all the identity categories that you could find. There's women amongst all of them. And because of that, we're divided. And we have to work actively against a system that promotes our divisions in lots of different ways. We have to really be intentional about kind of going out of our way and learning how to create friendships with those who are different from us. And so that's a real challenge that is posed to us by the systematically by the situation that we live in. Now, it actually takes a lot of energy and a lot of investments to keep people separated and apart. So one way to think about it is how to frustrate those efforts, right? And the other way to think about it is how to create bonds across difference. So what that means to me when I hear that, and there's probably different interpretations of this, but what that would mean in one sense is and I think someone said this to me at one point and it stuck in my head. I'm not sure where it came from, but the idea is to cultivate relationships that are cross-generational. So be intentional about making friends with people who are, a generation older than you, a generation younger than you, to start to create those intergenerational bonds that are often broken for women, and especially for queer women who in later life, as we become more and more socially invisible, which is something that has been documented, we also tend to go back into the closet. So we become invisible to each other as well in that process. And also being intentional about making friendships across other types of differences around which our identities get wrapped up. So differences in terms of class, which is really hard to overcome. Look at your friends group if you have friends at this point. I know a lot of us don't have a lot of friends, but at least I feel like I have a very small set of friends, which is appropriate because often we are made to believe that we should have these huge sets of friends and maybe we have lots of followers online or we know lots of people superficially. But the human scale is such that we can really only attend to properly, put the energy into a very small handful of other people that we allow to be in this kind of relationship with. Take a look at your friendship group or friends or people who you would want to be friends with, who you imagine as potential friends, and think about whether they are the same class as you, the same racialized identity as you, the same cultural background as you, the same educational level as you, the same ability as you, physical, or there's lots of different ways to be disabled, different geographical locations, right? These are all ways in which we can think about friendship. And the topic of friendship is something that I'm really quite interested in going into a lot more. Friendship and also the formation of kinship structures, alternative kinship structures, something that I've worked on as an adult, not very successfully. I think there's a lot of pushback. No, it's pretty hard to not only create, but also maintain alternative kinship structures. In my experience, friendship gets quite a short shift, I think. Friendship, I think, can be very powerful. And looking at the history of friendships, especially the history of friendships between women and the idea, because women have always, I mean, it's a very interesting history. Women have always had these really intimate friendships. And maybe someday I'll speak a little bit more about this. But over time, that has become harder and less recognized. And so, yeah, so I find the Maria Lugones piece a really nice entree into all of these kind of topics of how do we intentionally make friends, create friendships, create kinship-like bonds, find our fam and our peeps out there in the world, and have it be people who reflect us back, but with enough of a difference that it can open us up rather than shutting us off and into our little bubbles that we are constantly being, or coerced isn't the right word, curated into through social media. That's something that I have been thinking about, how to model that, like spatially, how to talk about it in a way that makes sense, that can resonate for people. Because I think if I can set that context up correct, I think the value of this essay will become very apparent. Okay. And then that's sort of a wrap on that conversation for now. The last thing that I wanted to mention is that I was on Reddit and someone was asking about self-study of philosophy and how to do that and how to do it for free. So a while ago, probably 10 years ago now, no, not that much, 6 years ago, I attempted to create an online platform for philosophy that included a curriculum for learning philosophy using all free online resources. Now, that's probably outdated in the sense that there's probably lots more, even better resources available now, because this was a while ago. And it took a while for philosophy to even hit the internet. To believe it or not, when I started, you search for philosophy on YouTube, was very, very few things that were even there. And blogs as well. So I'm thinking that this would be a useful thing to kind of resuscitate this project. But I don't want to just create it like a course or a curriculum, because I think what people need isn't just the list of texts or the list of materials to go through. They also need the context, the cohort, the group that is doing that together. That is part of what makes grad school or even undergraduate very valuable, is that you have a set of people that are going through the same process with you. And that type of context makes it possible to stay with materials when they get difficult, or to really focus on creating something to share with others. If you do it in community, you're not just doing it on your own, isolated, right? So I'm still thinking about how to do this, because as I said, I have done this in the past. It didn't find its audience. I've always been someone who builds things and doesn't worry too much about getting it out into the world, because my interest really is in building the new shiny thing. I love to build the thing. And then once it's built to a certain degree, I kind of let it out into the world and see what happens. But this is something that was inspired by someone who did something similar. Actually, now that I think about it, this was when Philosophy Tube came out. And they were saying, like, their opening to the audience was, I'm going to give you my philosophy education for free. Everything that I learned about philosophy. And that's how they got their start. I haven't looked at Philosophy Tube in a long time, but I do know that this person who started has since transitioned, and I don't know their name now. I don't know her name. So I should probably look that up. But I think that's where I started as well. And modeled on that, I basically built the technological platform, right? Because I was learning how to code, and this is one of the projects that I worked on for a while. It was called BFill, as in B. Anyways, so I was thinking of going back to that and maybe updating it and how to do that best. Because it was the whole like history of philosophy plus 19th and 20th century European philosophy. And once it got into the 18th and 19th and 20th century European philosophy, the resources were really scarce at that time. But I did find some good things that now nobody knows about. It's the other thing that I wanted to talk about, actually, that when I was an undergraduate, I worked in the library at the University of Oregon. And that is when the like JSTOR had just come out. And we used to get on floppy disks an update of these databases, and we would have to update our machines. Anyways, it was a whole thing. But at that time, I started to see students coming in to do research. I worked at the reference desk, and so I would actually help people to do their research for their, academic work. And I saw the whole transition. I wanted to be a librarian too at one point, but maybe still, there's time. There's always time, right? Well, I saw the transition between people going to the index cards and doing their research there, going to find the books, the kind of analog manual research model. I saw that turn into, if it's not reachable via Google, or if it's not on, and then it was, if it's not online, right? Because the JSTOR would refer to things that were in the stack or that were published. So it went from that to online. If it's not online, it's not relevant anymore. It doesn't exist. So then there was a project to try and bring online a lot of materials to scan books. It was a Google project where they got to copyright the electronic version of all these books that were in the public domain. So then if it wasn't available online or a reference to it online, it did not exist. And you know where we are now? This is the next step of that. If AI doesn't refer to it, it also is going to get buried. So each new technology brings us all this knowledge at our fingertips, but we also forget a lot of what we used to know. We lose a lot of references. We lose a lot of knowledge in each stage that we go through. So at that time, there wasn't a lot on continental philosophy. And I bet if I went back now, that the resources would be there to make a really great curriculum for studying continental philosophy and do it using all free available online resources. I think this is something that people would be interested in. And I'm probably this goes out to just my subscribers, but I will probably float that idea in the chat at some point, kind of when I get to it, and see if that is something that could become part of the upcoming Discord, to have a channel that would be the study of this. And also how to organize that, because people are going to be coming into it at different times. And it would be really nice to have the people who have already read the Plato section, right, and are on Aristotle, helping the people who are just starting with the Plato, or somehow having, I'm not sure how to set it up so that it is not hierarchical, right? So that it is a horizontal structure where people go through at their own kind of pace, but they still have kind of a community. Or maybe set it up as cohorts. Maybe that's the best way to do it. I'm not sure. This video is getting long, even though I started out not thinking that I had anything to say today, but there you go. I'm going to stop it here so that I can edit and go on to do the rest of my work today. So with that, ciao, and hopefully I will see you tomorrow.